What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Comicsy Podcast, the official podcast of Comicsy.com. My name is Joseph, and this is episode number 17. On the program today, we are discussing season 1 or part 1 of the podcast Alice Isn't Dead. Angela and I discussed the podcast Mystery Show by Starlee Kine a few months ago. We really enjoyed that one. That one's a, kind of a light, whimsical podcast of, Starlee going around trying to use the internet and any resources she can to solve weird little questions people have. This is something very different. Alice Isn't Dead is it is a narrative podcast, of sort of more mysterious and dark narrative podcast, all told from one woman's perspective and just with one woman's voice. So the one voice actor does all the narration and all the different characters in the episode. It's interesting. I think Angela and I are going to try to unpack a lot of our feelings about it, because I think we both came into it with some pretty strong feelings and then try to get at exactly where did those feelings come from and if they were fair, right? This is both acknowledges this is sort of a unique and beautiful thing, right? It's very literary. I think we both enjoyed the prose throughout most of it, but still, right, it doesn't necessarily mean we enjoyed it, and just trying to unpack, like, where did our strong feelings about it come from and why. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll be back with our conversation on the other side of this short break. So we're not going to do season 2. Is that fair? Okay. So this will be the only time we talk about the podcast Alice Isn't Dead.
Yeah.
Just to set it up for people a little bit, from the people who created Welcome to Night Vale, another podcast about which it's a podcast, but the podcast is the radio recordings that, like, a local radio show. And there's all this weird stuff that happens in this town called Night Vale. And all that weird stuff is sort of talked about on this local news radio show. But that is the podcast, right? So the podcast would be is what that radio show would be. I have only listened to a few episodes of Welcome to Night Vale, right? But this, I can imagine it deals with a lot of the same sort of weirdness that this podcast does. Okay, so we talked about Kentucky Route Zero a couple episodes back, and you did get some of those vibes while listening to this?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was like it made me sleepy. But it made me sleepy for the same reasons.
But Kentucky Route Zero had a lot of words, so I get why that was a lot of reading, right? And I get how you nod off while you're reading, but why did this make you sleepy?
Also, the vibes too. I don't know, it moved very slow, and then random things would just happen. And then I would be confused.
Okay.
Much like my experience with Kentucky Route Zero.
Okay. Generally, this is a podcast about a woman who is searching for her wife who has gone missing. Up until recently, she thought she was dead, but then she saw a local TV news broadcast, not local to where she lives, but because she's a trucker, she was on the road and she saw this local TV news broadcast, and she saw her wife in the background. So then she knew that she was alive and sort of goes on this journey to find her, and a whole lot of strangeness happens in between. And I agree with you. So what those early episodes were hard for me because, at least in Kentucky Route Zero, I think we're going to be talking a lot about both of them in this.
Oh, great.
Well, no, but right. So with Kentucky Route Zero, right, you're doing, it's a game, right? So you're looking at something on the screen, you're listening, right? There's not dialogue, but there's noises, so you're listening, and then you're also interacting with it with a controller, right? So even if the words, right, because the story is communicated mostly in the words, right? But the visual, being a game, it's also the visual aspect is very important, right? But there's sort of multiple modes for it to tell you what to pay attention to, multiple ways for it to draw your interest towards something. And in a podcast like this, there's only really one way to draw your interest towards something, right? And that's with whatever you're hearing, right? So you're hearing the same woman's voice the whole time, and they can sort of do some of the diegetic sounds that she would hear as she's telling this story, right? The sound of cars, or the sound of a train, or the background of, if you're people talking in a diner, right? You get some of those noises, but those are used pretty sparsely, I would say. And so they, right, in those first couple of episodes, they're teaching you how to listen to it, right? And I don't know if they do a particularly good job in those early episodes because it's told, and did you get the sense that this was something that she was recording, Ange, or what, like,
Yeah.
Okay, so you got the sense that she was like, this story that we're hearing is something she's recording.
Yeah, because there's a little like beep beep sound.
Okay, because I always, you know how you hear that like that like static right before she starts talking?
Yeah.
Or when it like cuts, right? When it cuts, yeah. I almost, I was wondering, like, is that the like static? You ever hear like a semi truck driver like use their intercom, like they have that like intercom thing, and when they hit the button, it reminded me of like that's like
when have you heard that?
I don't know. It's just like it's a noise I've heard.
How do you know that's a noise that exists?
It's a noise that exists, and I've heard it, and it reminds.
What kind of semi trucks have you been into?
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe. Because Uncle Mark has, like, he works for a trucking company. Maybe it was, I don't know. But it's like the static when you're, like, hitting the talk button on a PA system.
Or like a walkie-talkie.
Yeah, oh, there it is. Like the static when you're, like, hit the talk button on a walkie-talkie. So I guess I wasn't sure if she was recording this or if this was just something she was sort of saying, right? And we happened to, like, hear it. I don't know. I guess you're probably right. It wouldn't make sense if she was just, like, saying it and we heard it, right? Something she recorded.
Plus, if anybody actually talked like that in real life, I feel like they would get bullied.
Talked like what?
I think I see it in your next bullet point. We'll come back to that.
Okay, I'm not exactly sure what you mean. But like I said, I lost my train of thought a little bit.
Sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. But it's this nonlinear narrative, right? You're only hearing this woman voice. There's like background noises of where she is, right? If it's a diner or if she's driving or something. But even when other characters come in, it's her doing their dialogue as well, right? And you sort of hear these statics that indicate it's a new recording, which is sometimes, right? Sometimes the narrative continues, but sometimes it cuts to an entirely different thing. Kind of in the way, probably reflective of the way that like a person actually thinks, in the way that it's not always, right? Your thoughts aren't always like linear in that it makes sense how you go from one thought to the next, right? If it is just her talking into a recorder. That said, right, I don't think I would say in the first 3 episodes, because the first 3 episodes are very nonlinear, I don't think or at least I didn't know what I was like supposed to pay attention to. I could get the broad plot of like what was going on, but like there was a fair bit of hitting the like 30-second back button on my iPhone to just be like, what did she just say? Or like trying to like piece it together. And so I think in that sense it's a little bit difficult to listen to, and I guess I'm not even like I get how you sort of turn off, or you miss like a couple minutes and you're like, oh, I don't know exactly where I am, but maybe it doesn't matter because this seems everything's a little bit out of place anyways. So I get how that happens, I think, to let you off the hook a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know, where do you want to go next? Like, I guess, so you missed some of the middle episodes, right? But you heard the beginning, you heard the end.
Can you you should just quick say everything that happened.
Quick say everything? Oh God, there's a lot that happened.
For not for me, because I totally remember everything, but for our listeners, I think you should go over.
Do we need to go to Wikipedia? I don't...
You know what? I did go to Wikipedia to try to find a summary. There are no summaries. I could not find a summary. Okay, but so it's this girl named Keisha who's looking for her wife.
But you don't find out her name is Keisha until the last episode, until episode 10. Okay,
good to know. I thought I just was smart.
No, you find that out because Alice turns up in the last episode and she says Keisha, and you know it's you. Otherwise, you don't know her name. Yeah, until then.
Right, and then there's a thistle man, she's a truck driver trying to find her wife. Things keep coming at her.
Yeah.
She's sad because she misses her wife and she wants to find her.
She's a truck driver, right? So she's going all over the country trying to sort of pick up these different leads looking for her wife, right? And she, in episode 1 or 2, right, she has a very weird encounter with a man she's in a diner and she sees a man and he's staring at her, and he comes over and he sits down next to her, and it's very much, this is a whole conversation, right? And I don't know how interesting it is, but it's described very much in the way that he's invading her space, he's invading her privacy, she doesn't want him there, right? But it's unwanted attention from a man, right? She's uncomfortable. she senses that there's something very wrong about him, right? And it's scary, right? Because she is by herself. It's just her and her truck, and there's no like protection from her. And that's something that comes up in a later episode, right? But this man, the Thistle Man, is sitting across from her, and then he like calls over to someone else who's sitting in the diner, and he takes a bite out of the man's shoulder and proceeds to, I forget if it was in the parking lot or in the diner, but he proceeds to like eat him, right?
I think it was the diner.
I think it was inside the diner. He quite literally proceeds to like eat this person, right? And
which is gross.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
He doesn't chase her, but right, she encounters this Thistle Man, right? And he tells her to like stop searching, right? And the thing that she's searching for is Alice. And, so it's implied that that's kind of what he's telling her to do, but she doesn't, right? And so this Thistle Man keeps showing up and he keeps chasing her. And, eventually, she sort of comes to this conclusion, right? If she can figure out who the Thistle Man is or what he is, that will lead her to Alice, right? And so she goes to like a factory in Florida, and then she meets a girl as she's leaving Florida, and they go and try to find, this girl was working with a police officer who was investigating who the Thistle Man was, but it looks, right, the girl and the police officer were supposed to meet, but the Thistle Man intercepted the police officer and killed him. And so Keisha, the truck driver woman, and the girl go to where the police officer worked and get all of everything he was working on, all his emails and everything, to see what information he had figured out. He figures out what town the Thistle Man came from. She leaves that girl there, goes to the town, finds a town full of Thistle Men, goes and is kind of like, I don't know what to do, right? If they eat people, right? I don't really know if I can stop them. So she leaves it alone, but then she sees, right, the Thistle Men don't leave her alone, and they show up where she lives, and they're sort of threatening her, right? Threatening her from, right, in the comfort of her own home, right? And so she realizes like she's never going to be comfortable until she deals with this. So she's like, I'm going to go deal with it. And if that means I die or they die, right, one of those things is going to happen. Right before she's going to drive her truck into the gas station in the town of Thistle Men. But right before that happens, Alice shows up and is, you've been searching for me. I'm doing this. Right, these men, right, but more like what they represent is an issue. I'm dealing with this. Don't search for me. We'll be together at a point in the future, like when we can be. Keisha drives her truck into the town of Thistle Men. She kills the like main one who has been the one who ate the guy, the one who's sort of been haunting her. Yeah. Stalking her very much. She kills him, and then right when she kills him, this army shows. They describe it in the show as an army. This army shows up, and the army is wearing jumpsuits that have the same name as the trucking company she works for, and they tell her like, get back in your truck and keep going, and then she does, and then it ends. And that's just season 1. There's 2 more seasons, which doesn't sound like we'll be talking about, but those are the broad strokes of the story. But it is something that needs, as I say it out loud, there's lulls. I think it drags in places. I think the non-linearity of those first few episodes, I don't think it represents the best of what the show is. And I think the show gets a lot better when the narrative becomes more linear in the back half. I think episode 4 onwards are mostly linear, and I think the show gets a lot better when that happens because, and again, I haven't listened to a lot of Nightville, so this just, I imagine this has the same quality as well, but a lot of the way that they describe things is extremely vivid and poetic, right? It reminds me, right, they focus a lot on people's bodies, right? Like the way their skin is, or the way their eyes are, the way they smell, and the clothes they're wearing, right? The way their teeth look, right? And there's these but even just the sort of flourishes with the language and the way they describe very simple things is really pleasant and enjoyable to listen to. And I think that really shines when you are able to listen to it in a more linear form, and you're not trying to figure out what's going on in those early episodes detracts from what's actually a pretty pretty interesting story. The woman delivering it has a really good, nice voice. The audio mixing, right? There's not, again, sparse, but like the audio mixing is good. And yeah, and I think that shines a lot more in the like linear sense, right? And I think the thematically it hits a lot stronger in its linear form than it does in its non-linear form. Was the non-linearity of the story something that put you off, or was it more just the vibe of it? Everything.
Okay, I think that like the language or like the style, it at first it was like, oh, this is nice, but then for me I kind of got like bored with it, I guess, or it's like it felt like, I don't want to say it was like overdone, but like sometimes the things that she would say were just like I kind of had to like laugh at a little, like his fingers were yellow but not yellow, and it just kind of reminded me of like poetry I would try to write in 7th grade for like English class. And like I guess maybe I'm just not as appreciative of it.
No, but I think that's a fair critique in the way that
like I feel like parts of it were nice, but I think that it was overshadowed by like the parts of it that I don't think needed to be as like drawn out.
But I think that's a good point, because sometimes, right, that, and I'm sure these are like highly edited, right, in the scripts, the audio, right, I'm sure everything is highly edited, but right, sometimes that economy of language, right, saying something simply can actually be a huge asset. And if you have all of these flourishes with the speech, another one gets lost, right? So, like add more and more can get, like those flourishes can get lost as opposed to adding to the effect that you're going for. I think that's what you're trying to say.
Yeah. And also, her voice, she has a very nice voice, but it is like, she's a very soothing voice.
Yeah, it could totally put you to bed. She could like be one like, of those things. Yeah.
Man, yeah.
Yeah. If you were listening to it, like try it before you were going to bed, and that's probably not the best.
I would listen to it when I would wake up, and then I would just fall back asleep.
Okay. All right. So like avoid waking, or is the time you wake up. Avoid bed. Don't listen to it in bed, maybe, because it's just okay. You said there were some things that you liked. Can you pull out some of those things that you enjoyed?
I was just looking at your show notes. You will always live the remnants of your life you led. I think you misspelled led.
Oh yeah, I did.
Up until this point. Like that's, yeah. Like, and if that was like put, not sandwiched between like other like sentences that were like also nice sounding and thoughtful, I think it would have stood out more.
Do you remember last, when we were watching Grand Budapest Hotel, right? One of the questions you asked me is like, do you have any quotes, right? Any lines that stood out to you? Do you think it's easier for a line to stand out in a movie than it is in a podcast, right? Because a podcast is all words, right? You don't have that visual, so you can't tie those words to anything. Do you think it's easier for a quote to stand out in a movie or a book than it is in a podcast?
I don't think so, because I think like quotes stand out when they're like when they like kind of come out of nowhere. Like I guess I can't think of any like quotes from podcasts, but like that's also because I listen to like Nicole Byer podcasts.
Mm-hmm. No, but surely there's, I mean, I don't think it matters what type of podcast you listen to.
I guess yeah. I don't know. I don't think that it's, being a podcast has like that much on whether or not quotes will stand out. Mm-hmm. Like, I guess maybe it has like, it takes maybe a lot more to like build up to like a good quote, because it's just like talking. Mm-hmm. But like, okay, so yeah, like, I used to listen to like Modern Love. You know that one? Yeah. Like, I think they had some pretty good quotes. I mean, granted, I can't like remember any of them.
But you remember listening and being like, oh, that's like, they just, that sentence, right? Or whatever, that idea.
I just remember like connecting with something, like just like a random sentence that they said in the middle of like their story.
And that's probably a better way to put it, right? Like, is there, because a quote from a movie or a book, right? It's a moment that you're really connected with. Mm-hmm. And you remember the words that person said, right? Maybe you can't always pick them out, but you can remember their words. Mm-hmm. But you didn't get that from this podcast. You have from other podcasts, but you didn't get it from this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, the why did the chicken cross the road thing trip me up a lot. I was just like,
so
I thought it was just to get to the other side.
Does he say that at the end of every episode?
I don't know. That was the only time I actually listened to the end of the episode because I thought that like the last 3 minutes were just ads, so I've been skipping them. But then I happened to listen to one, and he was talking about death and how they return, and I was just like, what does this have to do with the chicken in the road? I think it was the third one. No, second one.
And he said sometimes it's to get to the other side.
No, that was. I think I think he like posed the question in the first episode and answered it in the second.
Okay.
Or maybe something. I don't know.
After episode 1, I figured out that there's about 5 to 7 minutes of credits at the end of every episode. So I just started, as soon as I heard the music kick in, I just went to the next episode. And the only time I listened to it all the way through, he said, why does the chicken cross the road? And episode 10 is the only time I listened to it all the way through. And he said, sometimes it's just to get to the other side. And so I'm not sure.
You don't know what he said the first time? I can tell you. I got it pulled up.
Oh, yeah. What does he say the first time?
Getting my podcast voice turned on because I guess it wasn't turned on at the start of this podcast. Why did the chicken cross the road? Because the dead return. Because light reverses. Because the sky is a gap. Because it's a shout. Because light reverses. Because the dead return. Because footsteps on the ceiling. Because footsteps in the basement. Because the sky is a shout. Because it's a gap. Because the grass doesn't grow, or grows too much, or grows wrong. Because the dead return. Because the dead return. I don't get it.
And that was episode 1. I think I remember that. And I think I listened to it in episode 1, and I think I listened to it in episode 10. I mean, again, right, that
what does it mean?
I don't know what it means, right? It might be more of that mood, right? I think this show is really going for a mood, right? The mood is hugely important to listening to it. And I think if you're not, and I think part of that mood is being very ambiguous in descriptions that are very poetic.
We should listen to all, because I think at each episode there was something different here. I found a Reddit page that listed all of what he said from each episode. I'll type it in the Google Doc.
I mean, just looking at these, right, I think there's so much of this show that is like that's really up for interpretation. Which is why I think our analogy or our comparison to poetry is fair, right? Because this show wants you to it wants you to listen really closely, and it wants you to appreciate, and like it should, right? I think their writing is really good. Like the script, the writing that they came up, I think it's really good. I think Angela makes a fair point in the fact that there's probably flourishes. There are things that just get lost because the density of that type of writing, or because it is that type of writing, and it's that type of writing the whole time, and it's really dense, and it doesn't really let up at any point, and so I think things get lost. But we could sit here and read these and sort of come to some sort of thematic thing. But then I think that number 10, right? So I listened to episode 10, right? Like those first couple episodes, I was like, I don't really know what's going on. And I'm like, is this just a story? Or is this like, are they trying to say something, right? And I think those first couple of episodes kind of give you the impression that it is just this story, right? Mm-hmm. I think episode 4 do you remember episode 4? The factory, when it's all takes place in that one place, and she's following that guy through the factory.
I think for the viewers, or the listeners, you should reiterate what happened.
She's making a delivery to a factory, and sort of a weird delivery. It's like these small cut pieces of wood that have different letters and numbers on them. It's a factory it's like built into the ocean, right? Where the ocean is like lapping at the foundation of the factory. And this guy comes out to help her unload it. She's like, come in, you gotta sign these papers. And when she sees him outside, initially he's young, and then when she goes inside to see him the second time, he's older, and he's like, come into this next room and help me stack them. And then she follows him in there, and she sees him in this next room, and he's even older, right? And so as he's moving through this factory, he gets older and older and older. And then the final thing they do together is he uses the pieces of wood that he brought, right? He fits them together into a coffin. Oof. And she helps him get inside the coffin, and he lays down and he pushes off, right? And he goes out into the sea, right? And it has nothing to do with anything else that's going on. It's just this odd little story in the middle of this show, right? It's written really beautifully. It's told in a straight line. And I think that is hearing that, and then episode 5 going back to the normal thing, I was like, oh, right, this is kind of, that's when I was really like, oh, this is playing in that Kentucky ReZero space, right? Because I mean, the first thing that put me onto that, right, is this is a very much like set in the in between, the like liminal spaces of America, in the open roads in Arizona and Utah and the desert, right, and through the Rockies and in the like Florida Panhandle, right, and in the like marshes and the empty spaces of the South up into like North Carolina, right? It doesn't happen in the cities, right? She goes up to New York at one point, right? But she's in upstate, right? She's in the mountains there. So it never takes place in densely populated areas, right? And you know, very much, right? So dealing with those types of in-between spaces of America, right, very much puts in that Kentucky Route Zero setting. But then this story, right, it's about the way, very clearly about like the factory and this guy's work is consuming him, right? And, you know, I think in this, right, Kentucky Route Zero is a lot about how capitalism consumes people and takes them, right? But that was a story about like rebellion and pushing back against that and hope, right? And there isn't any of that ever really in, or I mean, maybe at the very end there is, but we can talk about that. But like, you know, there's this story about this man, right? And he's never angry, but like this factory and his work is consuming him, right? And there's a lot of different ways you could go with that, right? Because it's like, you could talk about like how the way that like, you know, we have uncles, right, who like lived, or like not worked, but like lived, right? It's sort of a slip of the tongue that kind of means something, right? But like they worked for this like a one factory their whole lives, right? And it was like a good paying job. It was like a union job, right? And like they had that sort of security in their work, right? It wasn't whether it was like auto parts or like steel or whatever, right? I'm not exactly sure what type of factories they worked for, but in very like physical labor in that sense. But it was like they were fulfilled and satisfied, right? And that doesn't exist so much in America anymore, right? So you can talk about it in like that sense, right? Because there's no one else in this factory. Like it's one person, and at the end they're dead. They die. They go off and die peacefully in this way, right? But their whole life was through that factory, right? And starting when they were 18, right? Or there's another sense in the way that like the factory consumes him, right? That he spent his whole life working for someone else in this capitalist system, right? And at the end it consumes him, and he never had a way to like push back against that, right? But it's like, it's telling a very succinct and clear story, and again, using that beautiful language, right? And there's all these interesting ways you can think about it, right? But like for those first 3 episodes and for some of the rest, right, there's just like it's almost too ambiguous at certain points, right? And then I think the point I was getting to is, you know, I started thinking about that. I thought about Kentucky Route Zero. I was like, oh, is there some, right? Because Kentucky Route Zero, again, like I was saying, it's very obviously about something by the end. And it's not, if you're paying attention, you can figure that out. And this, I was never quite sure, like, is this about something? Should I be trying to figure out what it is? And right. And I guess not everything needs to be about something, but like certain parts of it really felt like it was. Like that episode felt like it was. Some of the, right, I think that scene, right, one of the scenes that like perked me up was that scene in the diner, right, when it's sort of talking about the interaction between like a woman sitting by herself and like a man who's sort of like invading her space or threatening her, right? Like that's, you know, the like those dynamics between men and women. And, you know, that's kind of like, oh, you know, is this about that? But then at the end, right, you hear episode 10 that like the thing they give at the end is, why did the chicken cross the road? And it says sometimes it's just to get to the other side. And I heard that and I was like, well, are they telling me this isn't about anything? Right? Like, you know,
yeah,
because it could be, right? And like, fair enough, if they don't think it's about anything, but like, I guess maybe I want that to be, maybe that's me being like a little bit simplistic or not critical enough, but like, you know, I guess I kind of want it to be a little bit clear. I don't know, maybe that's like not fair.
Well, I think, I don't know, I get that. I think, I don't know, sometimes I feel like if like a book or a movie or whatever, like any piece of like art, there's how do you say this? If like a book or a movie or like a podcast can have like their thing not have, like, any sort of message. But, like, wait a second. Even if it doesn't have a message, though, or anything, like, that's still a message.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I do think a movie or a book can communicate to you how serious to take it, right?
Yeah.
You sit down, right? You watch. Good example, I think. You come to something like King of Staten Island, right? And this is something we talked about with that movie, where, right, we knew who made it, we knew who was in it, we knew it was full of comedians. It was made by a guy who's made, like, other funny movies. But then there's that first scene, right? Where he almost kills himself, and you sit up and you were like, okay, while this movie might be funny, this movie is asking me to take it seriously. Not just because it's dealing with suicide, but just because, like, it's taking itself seriously, right? Because that first scene is not played for jokes. If it was played for jokes, then it would be like, okay, you don't have to take this scene that seriously, right? But that first scene with him in the car driving and then he swerves at the last second is not played for jokes in any sort of way, right? And so the movie is telling you this is serious. It's going to be funny. We laughed a lot, but, like, this is serious. Take this seriously. And when you end the podcast with being like, sometimes the chicken crossed the road because it wanted to cross the road, I don't know if is that, like, I don't know. Are they being ironic? Is this actually just meant to be a story? Is it? I don't think anything is ever just, like, I guess I think everything's, like, there's politics in, like, everything, right? Because any piece of art, right? It's an person's interpretation, a person or a group of people's interpretation of the world, right? And that is inherently a political thing because that's a lens that we view things through, right? That affects how we feel about different things, right? So nothing is entirely apolitical, but if that affects how they made the thing. But then at the end they say, like, well, sometimes things just happen because things happen. It's very like, oh, well, then cool. Like, you could have told me that earlier, and, like, I wouldn't have paid attention as hard.
Almost, I don't know if pretentious is the right word, but it comes off as just like why?
Yeah.
What was the point?
Yeah, no, I and again, I don't know if there's part of me that wonders if we're, like, totally missing the point. Like,
maybe, I don't know.
But I think this, I don't know, and I think it kind of comes back to what you were saying with, like, not the editing, but just there's so much mood and vibe, and right, and I think that even that saying, like, sometimes the chicken crossed the road because across the road, there's so much of that, like, it could mean so many different things, right? And there's so much mood and vibe of just, like, weirdness and strangeness that it is. I don't think it's hard to, like, I wrote a bunch of stuff about what this could be about. It makes you not want to pay attention or investigate it. I guess that's what I feel like. Just hearing that was like, oh, I didn't waste my time, but that flashed across my mind for a second when I heard that. I was like, oh, how seriously did they take it? Did I just waste my time? And, like,
or it's like kind of like belittles, like, all of, like, the time you spent trying to figure out what it meant.
I don't know. That's just not where I want to, like, be at the end of like, this experience, right? And I do think this is art, right? This is writing. Yeah. They put, like, they, like, created something, and, like, I guess that's not where I want to be at the end of it, with them telling me, like, maybe it does or doesn't matter, Even if they told me, if they were very clear and said it doesn't matter, even that I can work with because I can disagree with them. But them being very like, oh, I don't know, is, like, that's unsatisfying.
Yeah, I get that. That's also why I was like, I don't know. At the end of it, I was just like, was this worth it?
Yeah. I don't know. I have a bunch of stuff here. Okay, I want to get into a little bit about what I think it could be about, right? If they wanted to be about something, I want to get into a little bit of that. Because ever since I played Kentucky Route Zero, I've been, I think I mentioned it on that episode, right? I also read this, like, really good article, like this long form article about what it means to, like, be Midwestern. And, Kentucky Route Zero, while set in Kentucky, which I guess is more of the South than it is the Midwest, I think it applies, right? Because it happens in those, like, the in-between spaces of our country, right? And this show very much goes back to the idea that America is so full of the empty space, right? And how, we talked about Into the Wild recently, right? And, like, that idea of, like, the empty space and the frontier, and, like, this goes back to, like, cowboys and, like, right, the idea of, like, manifest destiny and, like, going out into the wilderness and sort of creating something for yourself by yourself, right? And which, also is reflected in this, right? Everyone's not everyone's, right, but certain people's very fierce attachment to this idea of like freedom, right? And, I forget my amendments. I feel horrible, right? But it's First Amendment and Fourth Amendment, right? The freedom of speech.
I never even learned them. Don't be ashamed.
But you know what people say, right? Like,
I know about pleading the fifth, and I know about the ones about religion and guns.
Yeah, the guns one is the one I'm talking.
Reporters.
I forget.
Second.
Is that the Second Amendment?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because there's a joke about it. The John Mulaney joke where it's like the first one was like
freedom
all
of
men are
speech.
created equal, you can say whatever you want.
Yeah.
The second one, we get to have all the guns we want.
Yeah.
And John Mulaney's like, I think they got their priorities mixed up.
No, that's right. And so a lot of people's idea of freedom is very tied up in those two amendments. I can say whatever I want, and I can protect my property, specifically meaning I can and like violently, like in specifically having a gun to do that, right?
Okay.
That is like very integral to a lot of people's idea of what it means to be free in America. And this, again, I feel almost dumb saying it because I'm like, does the show want me to analyze it like this? But I think this show is very much about like, what is the sort of cost of that, right? Because, right, Keisha's a woman. She is she's a lesbian. She has a wife, Alice, who she's searching for. Her, that is not sort of like stated in every scene, right? But like, as you learn that, you're like, oh, okay, so this is a queer woman and her experience of like the empty and lonely and solitary places of America, right? And like, what does she feel in those spaces, right? And so I think that's why that scene in the diner, right, when like she doesn't want that man's attention, he's invading and not giving her privacy, right? And like, how does she feel in that moment, right? Or like the other scene is when the Thistle Man shows up again, right? I love this scene, right? Because I've been here, right? She pulls off, she sees a Target and she's like, okay, but it's late at night, it's dark, the Target's still open, but it's the side of the road, like a highway in the middle of nowhere, right? But she sees cars in the parking lot. She's like, I'll be safe. He can't attack me because there's people around, right? And then he doesn't attack her, but he threatens her, right? And he puts his hand around her throat, and there are people there, and they see it, and they call the police, right? And the police show up, and the police are like, they listen to her, they listen to him, and they were like, well, you must have been bothering him, right? The police don't believe her. They don't listen to her. There is not safety in the public space, right? That public space at night in the middle of nowhere, right? Even though there's this store and there's people around, right? And that's supposed to imply some sort of safety, but it doesn't for her.
Yeah.
And the police, another institution that's supposed to imply some sort of safety, doesn't for her, right? And so I think it's very telling, right? They're like, and it becomes more direct at the end, but like these spaces are not safe for everyone, right? They're not safe for her. She is just like living her life. They weren't safe for the guy in the diner, right? And she does not get safety from the police. And something, I know this was made a couple years ago, right? But she repeats the line, his hand around my throat, right? Because she like comes back to that feeling again and again, and not trivialize, but something that came to my mind when listening to that, right? It, like in the sense of like, who do these like institutions, right? Whether that's like a store, right? Or a public space or the police, who do they protect or who do they like offer safety to? It's not her as a queer woman, right? And it's not, thinking about something that happened this last summer, right? You heard what happened with George Floyd, where a policeman kneeled on his neck, right? You hear like, or even the phrase like, I can't breathe, right? These like very succinct feelings of like, you heard that like phrase like a knee on the neck, like, or get off our neck, right? And she's using that same, or and this has happened before, right? But she comes back to this idea of like someone suppressing her ability to breathe, right? Which is directly tied to like living. And so I don't know, for me it like brought up, it got me thinking about like, who do these public spaces, who do these public institutions offer safety to, right? In the middle of America, where there's not big crowds or a lot of people, but even in those places too, right? Because something like George Floyd happened in Minneapolis, right? He was not safe in that big city, and or like Eric Garner in Staten Island, right? And like, again, I don't like, I'm saying this, I don't know if I feel like, I don't totally feel comfortable drawing those comparisons, because I don't know if like the work is asking us to take it that seriously, but like it is in certain parts of it, like dealing with those same issues, right? And then I think that, that metaphor, those themes become more clear at the end, right? Because when she finds the town full of thistlemen, and she tries to like go in to stop it, right? They tell her like, we are, I forget the wording exactly, right? But he says to her like, we are sort of the cause, right? Or we're the symptom, right, of like America's need for like freedom and this like frontier mentality, and like to have these big open spaces. We are sort of the like symptom of that, right? Or we are the cost of that, right? And the cost of that is that it's not free and safe and open to everyone, right? The way that you would want to believe it is, right? In the way that like the promise of America, right? Like all people are created equal and that everyone has equal rights. Like that's very much not the case, right? It is a lie. In the way that for, freedom has never been equal in America for all people. And so like that's what I was thinking about, right? And dealing with it. So, again, I guess I think this could have landed a lot better, right? Because it is dealing with some like very heavy stuff, but it undercuts itself in that last episode. And I think constantly with just like the sort of at moments with like the non-linear narrative, the density of like the sort of poetic language, I think it undercuts some of that, which is like something that didn't happen in Kentucky Route Zero, right? Like Kentucky Route Zero knew what it was about, and it was busy. It was a lot, not busy. Busy is the wrong word, but like there was a lot of textury. There were all these little different scenes, but it like never got away from that and never lost that in the way that like those themes that I think this show was working with did get lost in here. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Do you think that's like a fair? I know that like that's very heavy. Do you think that's like a fair reading of it at all, or did you have any like? Was there other stuff like, oh, maybe that this is what it's about that stood out to you?
No, I guess I mean the scene in the Target parking lot kind of did remind me of what you were talking about. I guess I didn't read into it as much as you did, but I was also asleep for half of it. Yeah. So I guess I did like notice like parallels between like this and Kentucky Route Zero in the terms of just like boring parts of America. Yeah, mm-hmm. But I think it is interesting to think of like all of that, and then just the last episode, the last 30 seconds of the episode could just be like, actually, psych.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I listened to that chicken thing at the end of the first one, at the end of the last one, right? And it really has changed how I thought about it. It's so interesting. It's interesting that we both like listened to like that last one and not the other ones.
Well, we didn't know.
Yeah. That Target scene's good, isn't it? That stood out to you as well? Yeah. Yeah. That's it's good. It's evocative. It's like very specific, and but like what that is. I think if you're from the Midwest, if you've taken those long drives and you've had to pull off somewhere, like exactly even if that happened hasn't you, right? And hopefully that never happens to you, right? But you know what that is, and I guess like that is what this show did really well, but I don't think there was enough of it, right? Saying something very directly and then letting it be
nope.
Yeah. I feel like I'm getting more frustrated as I think I started out with you and I was like, I think Angela might not like this, but I'm like pretty positive and I'm getting more frustrated as I'm talking to you, I think. But all right, we should probably leave it there and go to we decided last week we were going to call them our one-shots.
One-shots.
Our one-shots. So we'll come back after a short break.
Alrighty. So, we call them one-shots?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. I'll start. I have recently, for like the 4th time, downloaded Sims Freeplay on my iPad, and I'm loving it. I don't want to admit this in like a recorded environment, but I will. I've already spent a little bit of real life money to get a little bit further in the game.
Okay.
And it's great.
Does it save your progress from any of those previous ones, or are you starting over each time?
I start over each time.
Okay. Which
sucks, because it's like, I know, like, they're giving me all the crappy furniture. It's like, I know you're hiding the good stuff. Just like, let me have it. Give me it.
What's the end goal with the Sims game? I've like this.
I don't know.
Okay. Is it similar to Animal Crossing?
I've never even gotten to the end of Animal Crossing.
How far did you get with Animal Crossing?
I don't know, not very far. KK Slider never even came to my town.
He never came to.
I couldn't get it to be 3 stars.
Did you get to a point with Animal Crossing where you were happy with the way that your town looked and your house looked and everything?
No, I got frustrated.
You got frustrated.
And I said,
okay.
I'm never playing this game. But at least with Sims, if you get frustrated, you just like drop $10 and like clear all those hurdles.
But that's maybe worse because $10 adds up, right? With Animal Crossing, I don't think you can pay, right? You
can go on eBay and buy bells from like random people, and they'll come to your island and just kind of like plot. It kind of sounds shady.
Okay.
But yeah, there's like no way to actually like buy your way.
Okay. You can't pay Nintendo for it. No. You can pay other people. Okay. Okay. But you're enjoying it, right?
I am enjoying it.
Okay. Do you think you'll stick with it this time?
I hope so. I spent like $30 on it already.
Oh, okay. I guess I do hope you stick with it. Okay. You gotta turn the like thing on your iPhone off where you just have like the thumbprint because it makes it too easy.
Oh, the thumbprint is on. Yes.
Oh, you gotta.
It's so easy.
I've done that a few times. That thumbprint on the like iPhone or iPad makes it so easy to buy something. It's not good.
Apple knew what they were doing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, they knew what they were doing. Yeah. Okay. Why is it just because you're like, you don't want to find a different mobile game, or is there a specific reason that you have downloaded this so many times?
It's because it's like, I know I like it, and also playing it, because like, when I was like younger playing on like dad's iPad, or like when I got my first Kindle Fire, like this was like the game I would spend hours on. And so it's like partly it's like this was like my version of Dollhouses, you know? So it's just fun to like go back and play it. The thing is though, like when I was younger I would like make Sims of like real people, and looking back that's kind of weird. So now I just like let the Sims like randomly generate like people, because I feel like it's weird to control people who you actually know in real life. So I'm just trying to make like a very, very multicultural, diverse, inclusive town.
Okay. All right. Nice.
They're all like, and they're all gonna be like, and breaking all like the gender norms and the stereotypes.
Does it have a pretty, how is it in that sense as far as like having different skin tones, like having different gender identities? How is it in that sense?
They've always had like different skin tones. It's funny though, because when I had a younger, all my Sims were always white, which is funny because I'm not white, so I don't know why all my Sims are white. You chose them to be white, or they just randomly I chose them
generated?
To be white because I don't know what those other colors. Anyways, and so they added, since the last time, they added hijab.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yes, and I don't know, I've never tried to make any of my Sims gay or lesbian. I tried this time, and they get married and stuff. They can.
Oh, nice.
There's like and if they want a baby, you just kind of ask the stork to bring it. So there's nothing weird about it. Yeah.
Cool. I know there's a pretty big like YouTube Sims scene. I listen to like a video games podcast, and one of the hosts is really big into the Sims. So I know there's like a pretty healthy, as far as just like people talking about strategies for building your town or whatever on YouTube. Have you gone down that rabbit hole yet, or?
It's different because the game I'm playing is the Sims Free Play,
where
it's just like a different gameplay, because I have played like the computer Sims game, and they have Sims Mobile, and like those ones, they're different. Like I don't really know how they're different because I don't play them very much. I know that the characters in this, like the regular Sims, have like a lot more like autonomy, versus in Free Play you have to make them do everything.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't just walk away and my Sims like will have like multiplied and like gotten older.
Okay.
Anyway, it's fun. I
Nice.
think Jerry Ann would be happy. Is she still playing it?
Yeah, she said she's gonna, I forget what the final level is. She said she's gonna stop when she gets to the final. I think she's at 54. And so I think based on like the time, it'll be like May or June when she hits it. But
that's like exactly a year.
Yeah, so I don't know if she'll keep playing or not, but it's still a thing. She puts her time in every day. She plays more, like, that's more, I don't play video games every day. I don't do very many things, like, every single day.
Yeah, but you just get, like, random, like, time periods of your life that are just spent playing video games.
Yeah, like, big chunks. That's how I like, very big chunks. Like, but not consistently. We'll have to like check back in. I mean, I guess you don't have to tell us, but if you do delete it, I would like to know when.
Okay,
Maybe
I'll
not on
tell
the
you. I won't
podcast,
tell
but yeah.
I don't, yeah.
Not on the podcast. You can tell me how that goes. But
I'm going to try to not.
all right, so mine this week is I've been catching up on a couple magazines that I subscribe to. Do you subscribe to any magazines, Ed?
No.
No? Okay, so
what
they're
magazines?
Well, so it's not like a magazine you find on a...
It's not Entertainment Weekly?
No, it's not. It's a digital like magazine. So it comes out, they have like a big one and then they have like a little one and they each come out one a month. And you just like subscribe to their Patreon and then they send you the magazine. This one's called Unwinnable. The one that I really like, I subscribe to 2 different ones, but the one I read more often is called Unwinnable. And then their like little one that they send out every month is called Exploits. And I don't know, it's like nominally about video games, but like there's like people writing about movies, there's people writing about their travels, because it's writers from all over the world. There's people writing about, this one writer's name is Autumn, and so everything is always related to autumn. So sometimes she's just writing about the change of the seasons. And they're like, and you know, everyone's really good. It's all like pretty lighthearted. It's not usually too long. They'll have a couple features, but it's nice because they have a lot of monthly editors, right? So you're reading the same people's column. You know, I guess the same way that happens like in a newspaper, right? If you read the same columnist every day, but you're reading the same people every month and just sort of seeing how their interests progress over the course of time. So it's really interesting in that way, right? And it's like someone trying to like write on my own website, right? A lot of these are people who like freelance or definitely don't write. This is not their first job, right? They have like another job that's their full-time job and then they do this on the side. In that sense, it's kind of like inspiring to like read them and be like, if I keep at my thing, like, you know, maybe I could, you know, write for like the video game websites or like the comic book websites that I like to, but also just I get a lot of really, it brings up a lot of like weird niche music and podcasts and books and movies, right? And so not even that stuff that I go like seek out them, but just, you know, those like weird niche things, right? The people here have a space to write about it, and they write really well about it. So I've been enjoying that. I was like 3 or 4 months behind, so I got caught up in the last few days, and I really enjoyed, like really easy to read, right? Like when a book feels too much to handle, like going through one of these is really nice.
Have you ever thought about, or have you ever submitted like your writing to like websites or anything?
I haven't yet. I have thought about it a lot. I haven't yet, because I'm bad with deadlines and I'm bad with deadlines and procrastinating, and if I can't even handle that on my website, I'm like, I don't know if I can do it for someone else. But like I have like a bookmark list of like places that I want to do that with at some point. That. I should. That's like I don't like resolutions that much, because I think I'm like, it seems kind of,
I'm not gonna keep it.
Yes, right. It seems kind of arbitrary to do it like at the first of the year, because it's like, if this is a change I should make, then I should have made it at the point when I thought about it. But like that is a thing I want to accomplish this year, as not even like getting published, but just like the process of like submitting or pitching. Just doing that this year is something I want to do.
You could pitch to Unwinnable.
That's definitely one of the places. I have like other smaller places that I think would be like a better start, but like that's definitely on there.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. Let's go to our little outro and credits. You can follow Angela on Instagram at glow.angela. You can follow me on Twitter at Joey Glowacki, JoeyGlowacky. The music you heard in this episode is the song Something Elated by the band Broke for Free. You can find their music on the Free Music Archive. Please rate and review this episode on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast listening app. You can also email the show by sending your messages to podcast@comicsly.com. All reviews and messages are greatly appreciated. That's everything for the week.
That's the podcast.
We will have another episode about a different topic next week. It will not be Alice Isn't Dead Season 2. We'll never speak about this again.
No.
But until next time, everyone, thanks for listening and have a great week.
Bye-bye.
Never in my life did I imagine